Welcome to the social-engineer.org podcast number 134.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm 34.
Deep into the 11th year, my friend.
That's awesome.
It is. Someone DM'd me the other day on Twitter and said, 11 years, really? And I'm like, wow, I'm old.
Yeah.
There's not many, Paul.com and others, of course, that have been around longer, but there's not many InfoSec podcasts that are around 11 years long. So
That's
pretty
awesome.
excited.
Very.
And way back in the day, we wrote a blog post about this guest that we're having on today. And way back in the day, I tried to get her on. She's always been busy traveling, doing tons of research. I mean, this woman is in her 70s, and she's still deep teaching and doing research into this topic. Dr. Elizabeth Loftus is her name. She's testified at trials like George Franklin and Ted Bundy. She's been on 60 Minutes and Oprah. I mean, this is an accomplished researcher, an amazing woman that's really done deep research into memory and how our memories can be so easily altered. And I thought, what a better topic than for us to chat about here on the SE podcast. So
I would imagine there's going to be a lot of crossover between what she does and what we do.
Oh, I can't wait to find out too. And plus that she's been doing this since the 70s, This research. Like her wealth of knowledge, we probably can have a 4-day podcast, but I don't think she can give us that time.
A deep knowledge base. That's awesome.
Yes, I know. So let's get her on the show.
All right.
We are back on our show, Ryan and I, with our guest, Dr. Elizabeth Loftus. Dr. Loftus, it's wonderful to have you here with us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You've been doing scientific research since the 70s, and it seems like you've written just a number of books on the topic, have been researching into many different topics, but it seems like lately you've been really looking into our memories, human memories, and how they're formed and how they can be altered and different things like that. What made you want to research that part of us as humans, the memories?
I'd have to take you back to when I was in graduate school, and I took a course. A professor was interested in the subject of memory, asked me if I'd like to get involved in his research, and I started to do work on memory, but it was a different kind of memory. It was called semantic memory, our memory for words and concepts, our knowledge of the world. Knowing, for example, that Sacramento is the capital of California, or facts about the world. And I did study that kind of memory for a while. And then I decided I really wanted to do something that had more obvious and more immediate practical relevance. And so then I started to study the memory for crimes, memory for accidents, memory for events that would be important in the legal system.
And that's an interesting part, because I read a few different research papers on researchers who have stated openly that using eyewitness testimony is really bad for crimes, for lawyers and for trials, because eyewitness testimony can so often and easily be influenced and manipulated. Our memories are so often influenced by our emotions. Is that what you found to be true?
Well, I wouldn't go quite that far. It certainly is true that faulty eyewitness testimony happens. It happens a lot. It's one of the major causes for people to be wrongly convicted of crimes that they didn't do. And you can imagine the devastation that that would produce, not only for the falsely accused person, but their extended family. But sometimes eyewitness testimony is reliable. But to the extent that you have an accumulation of problematic factors, then it can not be that reliable. And that's when you have to worry about what you're dealing with.
Yeah, I saw this one interesting article. It was from a professor who was trying to talk about that. Maybe he took a much stronger stance than what you're saying here. And what he did to prove it in a class, he was teaching people who were going to be lawyers. And they were doing mock trials and mock interviews. And he had started off an interview with a student, like on the stand. And he had asked a question, which was, what time did you see the black man running from the convenient mart? And that simple question, the way it was worded, made that student believe that the criminal was an African American. when in fact the criminal was a white guy in this fake trial. And to the point where now that person was believing that the crime was actually committed by a person that didn't commit the crime because of the way the question was asked. How does that work? Like, why is it so easy to manipulate the way that we may remember a whole fact just based on a question being asked like that?
Well, first of all, that's a fascinating example. I have not heard of that particular example. Yeah, I'd love to sometime get my hands on anything that might be written about that particular example.
Sure.
I do know in general, because of my own work and the work of many other scientists, that the way you ask questions of people can affect the answer that you get. And misleading questions can contaminate or distort somebody's memory. So, for example, in one of my early studies, we showed people an accident and would later on ask a leading question that asked about the car going through the stop sign before it ran over the pedestrian. When there was no stop sign, it was a yield sign. And we can get people to now remember that they saw a stop sign instead of a yield sign. It's just another example of what your example is illustrating. But there are now hundreds, if not more, studies showing that this kind of post-event activity can contaminate somebody's memory.
And that's interesting to me because, like I've had this happen to me in my life where my siblings will tell me something that occurred when we were kids, and my recollection of it is literally like a 180. It's not even remotely close to what they described. And we go back and forth. It's not an argument, but we go back and forth and discussing who's right and who's wrong, like which memory is actually true, which one was reality. Is there a way to get to the bottom of that, to like figure out which one actually is real?
It's interesting to hear your example because I think it's very common in families for siblings to, disagree about things. Sometimes one sibling will hijack the memory of another sibling. In my own family, I have a brother who just has a fantastic memory, and usually we defer to him because his memory seems so much better. But the truth is, without independent corroboration, you can't really know whose memory is real and whose is a product of some other process, imagination, dreams, or some kind of other process.
I've had that happen with my son when he was telling the story to a couple of his friends when he was little. And he was talking about this thing that him and I did together. And he remembers it fully. Like he has details, but it wasn't him and I that did it. It was him and another person that went to this park and did these things together. And none of it was bad. It was all a great memory. But when he was telling the story, it was him and I. And to this day, when he tells that story, it's him and I. And I clearly know it wasn't. I was never there. It wasn't me. It was someone else that went with him. But it alters his memory. And I always find that fascinating because it's such a happy memory. He has this great memory of a time of him and I being together when he was 8, and we never did this thing. But it's a great memory for him, so I don't feel like saying, "Hey, that's really not real. You don't remember that, right?" Hopefully,
Well,
he won't listen
I
to
would say he's probably pretty normal. And one thing that you can do is just like forgive him. And, it's not a lie, but he
Yeah.
just has a distorted memory. And, many times it doesn't really matter very much whether there's a little bit of fiction sprinkled throughout our memories. And when it does matter is when somebody's liberty is at stake.
Right. And that's oftentimes where this discussion comes up, is because of, legal case, or someone's being accused of something horrific that they didn't do, but there's a few people who remember the details differently. And that's always nerve-wracking, considering that, according to your research and others, that it seems like it's quite easy to change someone's memory just by the way that you ask a question.
That is one of the ways that in the experiments and out there in the real world that it happens, but it's not the only way.
What are some of the other ways?
Well, people who have a conversation with each other about an event they might have shared can distort each other's memories. If you happen to witness something, a high publicity event, and see something on television or social media that talks about the event, if it's got misinformation in it, it can affect the memory of the original person. All of these kinds of situations provide an opportunity for new information, misinformation to potentially distort someone's memory.
So is there a mechanism in which you can like kind of retrieve memories with specific questions? Like I have personal events in my life that I don't remember certain parts of my life because of events that happened. And I'm just curious if there's some type of mechanism or some techniques that might be able to like actually, I don't know, retrieve those memories that might have existed in the past.
Sometimes, if you get a retrieval cue, something that can trigger a memory for something you haven't thought about for a long time or something you haven't been able to remember, it can result in the production of a memory. But the real problem is that sometimes in a person's effort to dig up allegedly buried memories, they engage in processes and activities that lead them to construct false memories. That's a potential danger.
That is fascinating to me. It's almost like all of us have some things that we'd like to remember better, but that makes it a little nerve-wracking. Like if you think that I go through this process that maybe then triggers either a false memory or brings up memories that my brain said, hey, let's forget that because it's pretty damaging. It may be trying to protect me from harm, and I'm like, nah, I'm going to ignore that and try to drum this one back up.
Well, I mean, so much depends on the particular situation, whether it's really a good idea to chase after some long lost memory or just leave it be.
In your history, you've actually testified at many trials, like even George Franklin, who is a well-known murderer of children, and Ted Bundy.
Well, wait a minute.
Yeah. Okay.
George Franklin, yes, he was convicted of murder based on, I would say, rather questionable evidence.
Oh,
He was
interesting.
ultimately released by a federal judge. His conviction was overturned, and he was then not re-prosecuted. So there's some serious questions about that murder conviction.
Okay, that's a great twist, right? Now, was some of your testifying at those trials, was that part of it was uncovering that maybe some of the facts weren't real?
That's not what happened in the Franklin case. George Franklin was accused of murdering a little 8-year-old girl 20 years earlier. And the only evidence against him was the testimony of his daughter, who said that she had witnessed her father rape and murder her little 8-year-old best friend, that she repressed her memories for 20 years, and now the memories were back. And she had a very detailed memory of what supposedly happened that day. She had detailed memories of other things she allegedly repressed, like years of sexual abuse. She also had other memories she came up with of other murders she claimed she witnessed. But in any event, they did prosecute George Franklin for this one murder, and he was convicted based on nothing other than this claim of repressed memory that was recovered. And he did spend perhaps 5 or 6 years in prison before a federal judge overturned his conviction.
Wow, what a long time to spend in prison for something you didn't do at all.
Well, it was. And, I hear that a major documentary is now in the works being produced about this Franklin case because it was a very high publicity case for its time in the San Francisco area.
Man, that really does lend itself to some of the dangers of memories that could be false because this poor guy spent 5 years in prison for something he never did, only based on a memory that wasn't real. That's a little scary.
Right. And it's kind of shocking to think. I mean, he was virtually, the first American citizen to be convicted of murder based on nothing other than this claim of repressed memory that had been recovered. And now, today in 2020, I think there's a great deal more skepticism about these claims of massive repression, of horrific brutalization, whether this ever happens.
So, how can we protect ourselves? Like, is there a way that we could protect ourselves from having our memories changed or modified?
Here's the thing. We have a number of studies over these decades that show that if you warn people that they could be exposed to misinformation or that they were exposed to some kind of misinformation, they can use those warnings and fend off to some extent the misinformation that they've been exposed to. The real problem is that we just don't walk around the world with these warnings at the forefront of our consciousness,
Hmm.
ready to be able to use as a shield to defend ourselves against misinformation. So I think we just have to be skeptical and not assume that every story that we hear is an authentic story just because it's detailed and delivered with confidence and emotion. It could be a product of some other process and it needs to be investigated when the stakes are high.
It's interesting for our industry because we are trying to help educate people on security risks, human security risks, the ways that we get scammed or social engineered, or the way that we get hacked based on human based vulnerability. And oftentimes, our ending answer, when we get to the very end of it and we're talking to people about, how do you stay safe, it almost mirrors exactly what you just said. It's like we have to have a little critical thinking. Sometimes there is no tool or process that can save you from your vulnerability. It is literally being, aware that there is this vulnerability that exists. And then second, taking some time to pause and critically think about the request being made of you. And is it reasonable? Is it logical? Does it make sense? Should I do this? Even if it does make sense, should I take a few minutes to let the emotions calm down before I take action? And it sounds like for our potential vulnerability of having memories changed, it sounds like it's a very similar process, just really critically thinking and not running with the first emotion when we feel that we have an answer to something.
Well, this is a fascinating connection, especially for me, because just this week, about a week ago, I got an email. It looked like it was from Amazon saying something like, we've
Yeah.
processed your order and click here to view the order. And it looks as if I've ordered some very expensive item, like on the order of $800 for some piece of electronics. And I thought, I wonder what this is. And just as I was about to click, I thought, maybe this is some kind of phishing scam. I better not view your order. And today, a highly similar one came again, seemingly from Amazon, with a different product and a different amount. And, I guess I'm fortunate. I almost didn't resist it the first time, but now I'm not going to click on this thing. But anyhow, just comparing this to
That's an amazing connection, Elizabeth. That really is, because, so first of all, congratulations. I cannot tell you how many people would not have paused before that moment of click and fell for that, and then actually probably been vulnerable. A lot of those scams, those exact emails that you just described, what they will do is they will go to a page that looks like your Amazon login page, and then you type in your username and password, and now the attackers have access to your account, which they can get your address, your credit cards, email addresses, previous orders, and they use all of that then to attack you in different ways.
Oh my gosh. Well, it never occurred to me. I mean, I did kind of wonder what would happen if I had clicked on it.
Yeah.
Your lesson here is frightening me enough to,
Yeah.
it's very, very useful. Thank you for this discussion.
No, not a problem. Actually, I love the connection because we oftentimes tell people that those who may not be familiar with these attacks, they're the ones who constantly being attacked. These scammers are looking for our younger ones, our older ones, those who may not be used to having technology all the time. And then it is scary. You get this thing that says, hey, your Amazon account just ordered this $800 item. So people say, well, what do I do? Well, what I tell people is don't click that link. Open up your browser, go to Amazon.com, log in the way you normally would, and see if there's any weird orders on your account.
Right.
There's a little button up top on the right that says see your past orders. And if you see an $800 item that you didn't order, then get a hold of customer support right away and say, hey, I didn't order this. How did that happen? And they'll help you change your passwords and stuff like that. But it's that process. That's what I love about this connection. That process, which, you felt the strong emotion of fear, but you paused for a second and your critical thinking took over, and then you took the right actions. And I feel like that's the same path, so we don't get, in essence, to use the word, we don't get hacked by false memories or planted memories or memories that may be modified.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Huh.
Do I need to go to Amazon and make sure that somebody hasn't placed the order? I haven't even thought of that.
Yeah, you should definitely log into your account just to make sure. I mean, most likely it's not. Most of the time they didn't gain access to your account, but they just trying to use those emails to make you click. but it's still worth checking. I always tell people, don't click on that link, but just open up your browser, Amazon.com, and you log in and you see if there's any weird activity on your account. That's same with your credit card. So you get a phishing email from your bank or your credit card that says, hey, this charge, and you're like, I don't know that charge. Don't click on that link. So open up a browser, go to your bank and log in and check it like that. And that simple process can keep someone so safe from getting hacked by a phishing email. And it sounds like that same process can keep us safe from getting hacked by a false or planted memory, is just to slow down, critically think, say, hey, maybe this thing isn't real. So before I act on emotion, I'm going to get some facts to verify. Okay, Ryan, let's take a quick break from the show to talk about what the heck is going on in the world of social engineer COVID style.
COVID style.
I don't even know how to start with this because basically everything's virtual, right? So
Yep.
November, if we look at our calendar coming up, November 11th and 12th is a virtual practical OSINT for everyday social engineers. So
yeah, excited about that one.
We have been asked for this forever.
Yeah.
Right? You wanted the OSINT class online. Here it is. Join Ryan and Kurt as they teach you practical OSINT. So what does this mean? Well, we're talking about everyday OSINT, right? So if you want a class that's got like a billion tools and, we're doing mathematical equations, I got a couple classes for you.
Oh, yeah. We have recommendations on that one. Yeah.
We have recommendations. But if you're looking for, hey, I got to do corporate OSINT, that's part of my job. I need to not only do this OSINT, but I need to take an investigation from A to Z using maybe no tools, just Google in my brain.
Yeah.
Then this class is exactly what you want.
Yeah.
And it's a ton of fun. 2 days. So
learn the methodology of OSINT. That's what it's about.
It's going to be awesome.
Yep.
Now, the very next week, right, 17th through 20th of November, we're doing the APSE, that's Advanced Practical Social Engineering class, all virtual. We did one for Black Hat. It went unbelievable. I was super surprised at how awesome it went.
Yeah.
And so good, as a matter of fact, that Maxie and I decided we're going to train another one. And this now is a 4-day class. Now, why 4 days? So we decided that, we're going to move the OSINT class to virtual. If you really want full OSINT, instead of just giving you OSINT Lite, you have that class before, you have the APSC after. If you want both, email us. We'll give you a discount on both, but you have those in November coming up soon. So get signed up for that. Guys, yes, Human Hacking Conference is happening. March 11th through 13, 2021. Now, how is it happening? I don't have an answer for you yet.
Yep.
There's some talks internally here. Now, don't tell anybody, okay? Don't tell anybody.
It's just between you and me, Chris. Just between you and me.
Just between you, me, and whoever is listening to this right now. Okay, but we may go virtual. We may.
What's that going to look like?
I don't know yet, but I am nervous because the WHO is, and I don't mean the band, I mean the World Health Organization,
Yep.
has been writing some models of what's happening in the winter. And as winter comes, we are being told that COVID may increase. Excuse me.
As he coughed.
As I cough, because I have COVID. No, I don't.
No,
I
you
don't
don't.
have COVID. I was just tested and I don't have it. But we're worried about taking the risk of getting anyone sick. And we're hearing a lot from our friends outside of America, those who came last year from Australia and the UK and the EU and other places like Asia who came to the conference who are now like, I can't travel into America. We're not allowed. Or we have to quarantine at our own cost for weeks and weeks and weeks after. So we're thinking we're going to go virtual. More news will come on that. So head over to humanhackingconference.com and check out that site. And keep in mind of our Twitter, Human Hacker, SE Village, and SOC Engineer Inc. And we will be announcing it there when it's solidified, okay? But I really feel that's going to probably be the case. Now, if you go to social-engineer.com, click on events and see all events, you'll see some of our 2021 training schedule that's there too. Yes, we are proceeding with live training in 2021 as of now. We shall see what happens as we get closer to the end of the year if we move those to virtual. So just keep in tune with us. Another huge announcement I'm really excited about is January 5th is the release of my 5th book.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm excited, man. HarperCollins has signed me to write a book all about human hacking and how we can use it to influence our lives, to win friends, to get things that we want, but in a non-malicious way. Literally, by being kind and empathetic, how we can use human hacking skills to just better our lives. So that's January 5th. Check out humanhackingbook.com for more information on that. Okay, let's see. I don't think there's much else. I mean, there's tons of stuff we can talk about, but I know that I like to keep the commercials nice and short.
While you're at our website, check out the rest of it, not just the events page. There's a lot of new stuff there.
Yes. Man, we just launched a new website. I am so excited about it.
Yeah, lots of good feedback.
Yeah, if you haven't seen social-engineer.com, check it out. Not only am I excited about what you'll see there, but we got so much good feedback. We're actually redoing SE.org now to mirror it, to make it more usable, friendly, and it's just going to be awesome. And you're going to love it when it's released. So keep the feedback coming, please, folks. We really do take it seriously, and it affects how we move forward. So thanks for tuning in, and let's get back to our show with Dr. Loftus.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of piggyback on the idea of protecting yourself from memory manipulation. What's your thoughts on the idea of people having memories manipulated via hypnosis therapy, or therapists that try to kind of drum up bad memories that may not have existed?
This is exactly the kind of situation that I began to be very worried about in the early 1990s, when you saw a number of people going into therapy with one kind of problem. Maybe they were anxious, maybe they were depressed, maybe they had an eating disorder, and they would come out of this therapy with a new set of problems. Namely, they were thinking that they remembered and had recovered repressed memories of horrific brutalization. And what was going on in many of these therapy sessions is these therapists were maybe unwittingly planting and helping to create memories in the minds of their patients. And people started to sue their parents and their other relatives and their former neighbors and others who they claimed had brutalized them based on these recovered memories. And so this led to a whole lot of litigation. It led to something that was coined the memory wars, where lots and lots of people were accused of things and found themselves landed in courtrooms having to defend themselves against these bizarre accusations.
That's interesting that you bring that up in the 90s, because I remember kind of in my own family weird memories coming up around in the 90s of my siblings talking about things, and that timing kind of really was something specific going on in the 90s that caused that to happen.
One thing that happened is that's when the Franklin trial was. That was about 1990. And after George Franklin was convicted of murder based on this claim of repressed and recovered memory, then lots of other people started to come forward with their claims of repressed and recovered memories. And there was a ton of publicity about all this, and thousands of cases erupted. And then what we began to see is that a number of patients started to realize their memories were false. And they then turned around and sued their former therapists for planting false memories.
Wow.
Some of them recovering multi-million-dollar verdicts and settlements from those mental health professionals. It was a pretty wild time.
But does that leave the person with those memories even after they've acknowledged that it's not real?
Lots of different things happen with these people. Some of the retractors really completely retracted their memories and realized now and have come to see that they were false. They formed an organization and a support group that now interacts on social media, as a matter of fact. Others of these patients sometimes would return to their families, but just not want to talk about it. And so there's kind of an elephant in the room that's not being discussed. But there's still many people out there who retain these beliefs completely estranged from their families.
It is. It's kind of like the way you felt when we started talking about these phishing scams. That's really scary. That's really scary.
Well, it is scary. And hypnosis, in one survey, it was used in maybe about 10% of these. So it's happening in a minority of the cases, but it's one of the worrisome procedures, because if you're dealing with somebody who's highly hypnotizable, you've got an even bigger problem of the potential for creating false memories.
That's an interesting way you worded that. Like, I'm not a believer in hypnotism. And you said if you have someone that's hypnotizable. So I assume that there are people who just believe it or something. Their memories, thoughts, or abilities are alterable by that practice.
It's just different I don't do hypnosis. I'm familiar with articles on false memories and memory and hypnosis, but there are different scales that can classify people according to whether they're highly hypnotizable,
Hmm.
whether they resist the suggestions and are not particularly hypnotizable. And the ones you worry about are these highly hypnotizable people, because they're the ones who have the potential, the largest potential for this kind of technique to exacerbate the false memory problem.
So if someone's listening to this, and as we're wrapping up soon, if someone's listening to this and they're like, I don't want to ever be a victim of having a memory planted or a false memory, are there practices or methods or thought processes that a person can follow to prepare themselves? Like, I know you said before that it's like giving information out, but like you said, we don't always walk around with that information in front of us. So is there something that we can do personally that makes us less susceptible to having memories altered?
Well, again, I know that sometimes warning somebody can protect them, at least in the short term. So, extrapolating from that idea, and this would be kind of a speculation, I'd like to see a bit of research done on this. If you can stop and ask yourself, why is this person trying to tell the story in a way that doesn't seem right to me? And just ask yourself out loud and force yourself to scrutinize any effort that somebody, whether it's a therapist, whether it's another person who might be trying to convince you of something. I think if you can stop and scrutinize it and just ask, is this authentic? And is there any evidence out there that it might not be? And what are the motives of the person who's trying to convince me? Maybe you can fend off the potential misinformation to some extent.
Yeah.
I'd love to see this kind of idea developed, maybe some scientific research performed to investigate its efficacy, but it's a speculative hypothesis based on the fact that we know that warnings can work a little bit for a while in some people.
It seems to all come back to just critical thought, both in phishing attacks and memory manipulation. It just seems the overwhelming theme, that if you critically think about the conversation you're having or the situation you're in, you can make better decisions.
Exactly. And I mean, one of the most dangerous things is just to accept the story uncritically and embrace it enthusiastically without thinking about whether it might not be authentic. And it's very tempting to do that when you hear somebody tell a story and it's got a lot of detail and it's got a lot of confidence, and maybe they cry when they tell you. It's very tempting to think, oh my God, this is definitely real. But false memories have those same characteristics.
When the riots started going across the country, there was a series of social media based news. So I won't say it was like, TV news, social media based news that was using video and photo footage from other attacks throughout the globe from years ago. There was this one that was the city in Lebanon that had been bombed and it was burning. And this person posted it on Facebook and saying, look at what's happening with the riots in Chicago. And it went viral. I mean, there were people talking about Chicago was on fire and people were, burning down buildings, and, it looked horrific. And I'm just wondering, is something like that also linked to your research and false memories? Because people started to believe this story and then react to it in a very real way. I know it's like fake news and stuff, but does this also tie into things like false memories?
Yes, I think it does. It definitely ties in. And you're raising a point. It's one thing for someone to accept this misinformation that's coming in the form of a misleading video, a video from a completely other part of the world, or whatever the misleading video is. It's one thing for you to accept it and incorporate it and believe it for yourself. And it's another thing to share it and then be part of the process that contaminates other people. And I do think we can do something to get people to be more critical about what they're sharing.
That would be an amazing bit of research.
Yeah, I saw something on Facebook recently, and I thought somebody had posted an article. I thought, this looks interesting. And I went to try to share it, and up popped a message. Do you realize this article is 8 years old?
Huh.
And it was supposedly a scientific study, and I thought it was a brand new study. And I thought to myself, that really did get me to stop and think, yeah, do I want to share an article that's 8 years old?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I do. Well, if we could have more flags like that to just get us to stop and think, are you sure you really want to share this? You know, we've given it a rating on a scale from 0 to 100, authentic to fake. It's looking like an 80. Are you sure you want to share it? We can at
Yeah.
least reduce the sharing.
Dr. Loftus, that's a genius idea. I think you should take this straight to the social media companies and offer some research on how they can do this, because honestly, fake news through social media, my wife and I were having this discussion. I'm constantly fascinated that it seems like my children, the younger generation, they get most of their news on what's happening in the world through social media companies. And that's scary because of,
And non-news companies. Yeah.
yes, and because it's altered based on the algorithms. You know, if you look at something like Instagram, owned by Facebook, it's all based on algorithms of what you like. It tracks what you look at, what you like, so it feeds you only stories that slant towards your likes, so you spend more time on their platform. So what you're being fed for information is literally just feeding exactly what you want to see and reconfirming your own belief system constantly, that is not ever bringing you into a critical thought or critical questioning frame of mind, because there's no alternatives being offered to you. It's always just what you say is truth.
Yeah, that's the selective exposure theory.
Yeah.
Well, also, you're obviously making me think about why we are living now in such a polarized world with so much dissension and so much disagreement. And I hadn't even been thinking about the contribution of social media to that chaos.
To me, it's been on my mind because I have a teenage daughter. I have a son who's a little older, but we constantly have family discussions about what's happening in the world with COVID and with the privilege from a lot of friends my daughter has that are not in that same situation that we are, and that have to deal with injustice constantly, and how that feels and how we deal with it. And I will hear things from them that I will go and research, and I'll find out that it all came from social media. It's just constant social media feeding this. And if you go and you look at a post, you know, let's say you look at one post that is every cop is out to kill you, and you view that and you watch the whole thing, now that's your whole feed. That is it. I mean, your feed will just be videos of people getting hurt by cops for days and days and days on end. And if you go the other direction and you watch, you know, videos of how that's all fake and it's not, and it's another extreme view, then that's what your feed will be. And I was fascinated by messing with it myself by saying, hey, today I'm just going to look at this kind of stuff, and then noticing those were my ads, those were my feeds, those were the things that were given to me. And then the next day going the other direction, and then that's what I get. And I'm like, wow, it's literally a crazy experiment that these algorithms are running exactly what you will be given and what you will be shown. At least in this country, I find that to be the case. I'm not sure how it is in other countries from people who are listening, if it's the same or not, but it is a fascinating thought.
Well, I suppose in some countries there's only one message that everyone gets.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So, Dr. Loft, this has been a truly fascinating conversation. If people wanted to learn more about your research, they wanted to know more about you and what you're doing, where can they go to find out more about you?
I think one good place to go is my University of California, Irvine website, because I have lots and lots of articles that people can download for free and help themselves to older studies or more recent studies, to some media coverage and stories about the work. One I particularly love is something that was in slate.com called The Memory Doctor, and I have a link to that on my website. Another place to go is I did a TED Talk. And so if you want a little 15 minutes summary lecture that summarizes some of this research, you can find it on the TED website. So those are just a few ideas where people can go where they don't have to spend money on books I've written.
I love that. Thank you. I have the webpage up for the University of California, and we'll make sure we put a link to that in the show notes and to your TED Talk. So that's wonderful. talking about books, we have a lot of people who listen to this podcast that are avid readers, and we're on our 11th year of podcasting, and every podcast we've asked our guests to recommend a book, and it could be about anything. I don't care if it's about the topic of memories. I know you have a number of books out that we'll put links to, so it could be those, or it could just be a book that you read that you really loved. Do you have a thought of a book you would recommend?
Well, sure. I'm going to be humble and not recommend my own book, but I'll recommend a book of a close friend and colleague, Carol Tavris, with her co-author, Elliot Aronson. It's one of my favorite books. It's called Mistakes Were Made, But Not By Me. Just a great book about how people, justify or talk about or are reluctant to talk about the mistakes that they might make in life.
I love it. And that topic is also something that we talk about a lot on this show. So that is really fitting. Just wonderful. And we've never had that recommendation. So it's a brand new book to add to the list.
Okay, great.
Oh, I can't thank you enough.
I'm going to have one of them on your show sometime.
I just made that note. As amazing as that is, I just said, let me look up Carol Tavris and see if I can get her on. Maybe I'll ask you for an introduction.
Oh, sure. I can do that. Would be
fascinating to have on, especially social psychology is something that really affects our industry because we are constantly looking at how we make decisions as humans and how those decisions are sometimes altered for the negative. And in the case of like that phishing email you talked about, and trying to analyze that so we can help build educational processes that will help people stay more secure. It's our whole mission in life. It's what we do. So anything that touches on any social psychology is a fascinating topic for us to discuss.
Okay, well, that's great.
Thank you so much for not just for this podcast, but just the decades you spent in researching this so important topic and continuing to spread the message about it. Really appreciate your time.
All right, yeah, fun to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Man, Ryan, I'm telling you, I wish we had her on more than once, but I'm actually happy that there was a delay in getting her on because I think that delay allowed us to have this moment where right now in history where we're at with social media and the world and COVID, that this information from Dr. Loftus was maybe even more critical for us to hear than ever before.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The tie into current events was amazing.
Yeah, I'm actually happy that if we had to have her on only once, because she's so busy, that this was the time it happened.
I just wish we had more time with her. That was a great discussion.
Yeah, I'm going to say this, and if she hears this, Dr. Loftus, I'm saying this out loud. I'm going to work on getting you to be part of Human Hacking Conference at some point.
Oh, definitely.
Because I think your information would resonate so perfectly with those who are interested in Human Hacking Conference, and you need to be a part of it. She needs to be a part of it. She does.
Yeah, we need to put time into that.
Well, guys, if you want to keep following us, you got social-engineer.org, podcast newsletter, framework, blogs, all the wonderful free stuff there. You have social-engineer.com for our corporate side where you can check out our services, our conferences, our trainings, all there. Please check out instantlivesfoundation.org. We appreciate your constant support for that. A couple new sites that you can look at, humanhackingconference.com for all things to do with SE Village in 2021, and Human Hacking Book, all about my new book. You can find our Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. We have a great group on LinkedIn now. Should really promote that more.
Yes.
Where we are talking about that, and we have a beautiful Slack channel. I didn't know what we were going to get when we started that, but
that has been amazing.
It's been amazing, and it's public Slack channel. Anyone's invited. You can come in. We talk about careers in SE. We talk about pen testing, phishing, vishing, pretexting, OSINT. We had a random dude come in and throw out an OSINT challenge on one of his buddies with permission. And
yes, of course.
The channel went wild.
Yeah.
And it was like 3 or 4 days of an OSINT challenge. It was awesome. So join us on that. And let me just see. I know people are going to ask, and Amanda will kill me for not giving you the way to join that. So that's social-engineering-hq.slack.com. social-engineering-hq.slack.com.
Yeah, come visit.
And that's our SE channel. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Come visit us, say hi. I think that's it, huh, Ryan?
Yeah, I think that covers it. It's a great episode.
Okay. Until next month. See you.